Hello. I take it that's the thumbs up to start. I see participants joining. Welcome. Okay, let's bring up my notes. Hello and welcome to Sydney. I hope you don't mind. I thought a slightly entertaining backdrop might be nice for this audience. I love this place. Everything I do is about supporting things in Sydney. It's a beautiful place to live, this enjoyable place to live. I was lucky enough to grow up here, but having traveled around the world and continued to come back each time, I just convinced myself every time that this is a beautiful place. So thank you for indulging me and having the backdrop there. It sounds like you've had a really good lineup in the things that you've seen. I'll say, I know the other people that have been presenting these, they're probably going to be better than what you're going to see here. But I'm really honored to have your attention today, and I'm going to make the most of it. I'll make sure this is interesting. I do want to say this is not going to be a presentation. I want this to be a conversation with yourselves. So please, I'm just going to bring up the chat. I would love people to just throw things into the chat. So there's questions you have or comments you have along the way. In fact, can I try this just to make sure you're all there? Can you open up the chat in your Zoom and type in a yes or no on whether you would like to be an entrepreneur? Yes or no in the chat, or maybe. Okay. Getting a couple, keep them coming. Okay, I'll circle back to that, but please chuck that in. I'm curious to see how people feel before we kick off. So I'm Murray Herbst. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship for UTS. My kind of origin story, if you'll indulge me, is when I was 16, I started a company. It was a software company. I was a bit nerdy. I liked writing software and seeing what people thought of it. And this was an ad blocking product. And others did it because it was fun, just not knowing what I was doing, but putting it online and then seeing people starting to pay for it. That kind of forced me then to figure out what I was doing, because once people start paying for something, you have a reason to make it better than it was. That company ran for 14 years, hit a peak of 100 million active users, and just infected me with a love of technology-enabled entrepreneurship. It changed my life because I looked at my experience there and thought, why don't more people have this kind of experience? Why isn't this a normal thing for people around me? So for the last 9 years, everything I've done has been things to inspire and support other people to pursue that kind of entrepreneurship. I was CEO of something called Fishburners. It was the largest incubator network in Australia. While I was there, I saw about 500 startups launch. I ran something called Startup Muster. It was the largest survey of startups across Australia. While I was at Startup Muster, we looked at about 5,000 startups. At UTS, while I've been here, we've seen about 700 startups launch. And it's kind of reinforced that love that I have for entrepreneurship. It's one thing to have a good experience yourself. That's one data point. But it's another thing to see thousands of other people having a wonderful time. Not all the time, but enough of the time that this reinforces in me that this is a good thing that more people need to know about and be supported in doing. So let me tell you why I love entrepreneurship so much, why now 2021 and forward is the right time for it, and why Sydney and UTS are the right place for it as well. And I'll remind you, okay, 55 people joining, this is wonderful. I'll remind you, please throw questions, random questions into the chat. Otherwise, I'll just be talking for a long time. So I don't like the dictionary definition of entrepreneurship. I'm not even going to bother repeating what it is. Because for me, entrepreneurship is just deciding what you work on for yourself instead of being told what to work on for someone else. Just think about that for a second. It's basically a different kind of work where you're self-directed, self-initiated, and kind of rewarding. You get to create the things that matter to you. You get to be your own boss. You get to set your own schedule. You get to work on technology that excites you. You get to fix problems that matter to you. You get to make the world the place you want it to be. I'm going to stop myself there because I'll just rabbit on about entrepreneurship is great. But in the chat, I'm mildly concerned that there's only one person that's chimed in with a yes about wanting to be an entrepreneur. But we'll see if we can change that through the course of today. I think the most important question, though, is, okay, entrepreneurship is good, but why is it good today? Which I think is more important. We live in a world today where technology is giving you opportunities and capability. So remember those two words, opportunities and capability as an entrepreneur. Technology is making it possible for someone sitting on a laptop in Sydney or anywhere around the world to understand and reach customers all around the world basically instantly and close to zero cost. For me, that's the opportunity side of things, where that hasn't existed in history before. I know probably everyone watching this grew up in this environment, as did I, and it's just a normal thing that you have the internet and you can reach people everywhere. But that wasn't the case before. This is new, relatively in human history. The opportunity side of things is important too, because that person sitting on a laptop at the UTS campus or wherever is able to produce things that matter for those customers all around the world as well. You can stick websites online, you can source things, you can set up e-commerce, you can produce software if that's your thing, or whatever it is. This kind of production machine that we all have in front of ourselves in the form of a computer seems completely normal, and now is completely normal, but is giving you opportunities that the generation before us never had. That capability to service all those customers all around the world, or just fix problems all around the world. When I talk about customers, I'm not just talking about financial customers, although that's often the case. I think solving problems for people can be social impact driven as well, if that's your thing. I'll just say, again, a reminder, chuck questions in the chat, please, because otherwise I'll rabbit on. I'll just pause for a second and think about something. So this is the world that you live in, where opportunities are everywhere, capability is everywhere. You may or may not agree with me on that. If you disagree with me, chuck it in the chat. Or if you agree, chuck it in the chat as well. But just as a mental experiment, imagine I'm right in what I'm saying here, that we do live in this world where there's infinite opportunity and almost infinite capability to service them. What do you think the limiting factor is in your being able to make the most of that? I imagine that extreme version where it is infinite and capability is infinite. I think the limiting factor is your initiative. If there are so many things you could be doing, so many people you could be solving problems for, and so many ways you could be solving problems for them, which I say there is now, the limiting factor is people deciding, yes, I'm going to figure out how to do that. In that world, it stops being, here is a defined set of things that you can do for a career, and starts being, there are things everywhere that you can be doing with the skills that you're gaining. There's a world full of problems that need solving, and it's up to you to figure out which ones you're going to do and how are you going to do it. That's a different world. And I'd say that's the world that we are living in now. The reason I feel really confident in saying the limiting factor is your initiative is, while I was at Fishburners, we were focused on this finding entrepreneurs out there, bringing them in and supporting them. And those kind of 500 entrepreneurs or 500 startups that we were supporting in the time that I was there were good, but they were already existing. It wasn't really testing whether the initiative was the limiting factor. At UTS, we've been trying something different. And it has been about, can you take people that don't care about entrepreneurship at all? People that in a chat won't pipe up and say, yeah, I want to do this, because they wonder what this guy is talking about. But can you take those people and expose them to something that helps them understand the opportunity and makes them feel that this is a normal, desirable, accessible thing, and helps them to take their first steps as well? I can admit this now because it was 3 years ago when we were starting, but I wasn't quite sure if this was going to work. But it does. The 700 startups that we've seen start in the last 3 years at UTS have really thoroughly proved to me that it's not about entrepreneurs that are already doing something being supported to do a bit more. It's about all the people that could be entrepreneurs and just need a little bit of help and a supportive environment to make something happen. And if you make that happen for them, those people go on and do incredible things, which we're starting to see now. We're 3 years in, but it is incredible. And I'll get to that in a second about what that actually looks like. Every day I see these kind of light bulb moments in the students that we're working with, where, say, there's a midwifery student that's been working on a particular problem, comes up with a device, says, what do I do with this? And then realizes, here's another student that took that and did something with it. And here's how they did it. And here's the support available to me from UTS to make that happen as well. And then they go on and do something incredible. Or the accounting student that is learning all the wonderful things they are, but realizing here's a problem in accounting that I don't see people solving. I think there's a better way to do this, and I'm going to do that while also studying as well. It doesn't matter where people are coming from across UTS. We support, under the UTS Startups program, we support every single student at UTS, no matter what they're studying. And we continue to support them after they graduate as well. So you're getting a sneak peek of this. This hasn't been announced publicly yet, but the UTS Startups program will be changing, so it's open to all students and all alumni as well in the coming weeks. So I'm just going to pause and summarize a couple of the points so far. That today you live in a world where technology is giving you opportunities to solve problems that people have never had before. Today, you live in a world where technology is giving you capability to solve those problems that people have never had before. Today, I think the only thing stopping you from doing something about that and realizing the opportunities you have outside of traditional graduate positions is your initiative and deciding to do something about it. And I think today as well, this kind of entrepreneurship can happen anywhere. It's a wonderful time that we live in. And I think if you are doing this kind of thing, you should do it somewhere safe, beautiful, fun, like Sydney, and in a supportive environment like UTS. So I'll get to now a couple of points about why Sydney for entrepreneurs and why UTS for entrepreneurs as well. So I'll start on why Sydney. Based on the data I have, so Startup Muster was the largest survey of startups across Australia. I ran that for 5 years. New South Wales has more startups than any other state in Australia. It has about half of the startups across Australia. And Sydney, which is here, is the city with the most startups of any city across Australia as well. It has the highest density of startup activity as well, particularly around the UTS campus. So our position right next to the city is a really helpful one because of the startup activity that's around us and the support that's around us as well. 10 minutes walk from UTS, you have something called Sydney Startup Hub. I was involved in setting that up 4 or 5 years ago. and that is the largest startup hub in the Southern Hemisphere. So outside of lockdown, unfortunately, for the last couple of months, it's been shut down because of the lockdown in Sydney, but that's going to end soon. But there's 2,500 people in there normally that are working on startups. There's probably half a dozen incubators and a whole bunch of accelerator programs in there. And it's just ridiculous to be able to walk in and see that density of activity. And it's free to enter. You can just walk up to people, say, what are you working on? And you never know who you're going to meet. I think that's a nice thing for people that are doing this kind of thing, to have that density of startup activity nearby. There's also something coming up that's even more exciting, which is Tech Central. So that is basically Sydney Startup Hub, but 10 times the size, and directly next door to UTS. So if you look at Sydney on a map, you've got UTS, you've got Central Station right next to UTS, and that Central Station is where they're building this giant tech hub. So that's going to have Atlassian, Canva, basically every kind of interesting large tech company around Sydney is going to move into that. And Sydney Startup Hub and all these new hubs that are opening up over the next year or two. It's going to be kind of ridiculous around UTS. It was already slightly ridiculous because of the density that was there. But this is going to take it up a notch in terms of what's around UTS. I'll also say there's more venture capital invested in New South Wales than any other Australian state by a decent margin. If you are doing a VC-backed kind of project, Sydney is a wonderful place to do it. But most importantly, though, for the entrepreneurially kind of minded, you will have UTS backing you in what you do, and particularly the UTS Startups program. So where are we now? I'm 20 minutes in and I've started talking about what I should. Now, thanks for bearing with me. Again, questions are good. Please start throwing a couple of questions in, because I've got 5-10 minutes of content left, and I'd love to start redirecting what I say towards what you would love to understand. So, for example, what questions do you have about startup support at UTS? What kind of thoughts do you have about your own entrepreneurial pursuit? What questions do you have about the Sydney startup ecosystem? I've run kind of the incubator networks. I've run large accelerator programs. I've run the programs at UTS. I've done large startups myself. If you have questions about the ecosystem here, I'd love to have a shot at them. Okay, fantastic question, Ishika. I will get to that in 1 second. Thank you very much for being brave person number one. And I'll get to it in a second because I just want to run through quickly the kind of support that UTS Startups give. But keep the questions coming. Thank you. UTS Startups is not just a little accelerator program that supports 10 or 20 startups to do a little bit more than they were doing, which a lot of universities have. It's not just a relatively small VC fund, which a lot of universities have. It's not a kind of rigid curriculum program, again, like a lot of universities have. We're a little bit different in what we do. It's a little bit strange. UTS Startups is the largest community of student-launched startups in Australia. We have 360 student-launched startups that we're supporting at the moment, from every faculty of UTS, and every single, like, it's very hard to find a part of UTS that we're not supporting students from. We're not trying to prescribe a particular path for an entrepreneur that comes through, but instead we're trying to create the environment where if you were starting this kind of company, this is the place to do it. There's two kind of main focus areas that we invest in that is trying to create this vibrant environment that I'm talking about. First, we want you to be connected strongly, really strongly, to every other entrepreneur at UTS that we're supporting. So you may not know what you need for your startup, but you should feel like you're going to be able to find it in this community of entrepreneurs. I find with communities of entrepreneurs that they tend to coagulate into successful teams. So we find a lot that people come in with one idea and they'll work on that for a little while, they'll figure out something about it, and they might join someone else's team where that particular idea is working out better. So they have a safety net around them. They have kind of skills they can share back and forth. They have people they can bounce ideas off. Or if your idea is going well, you're surrounded by people that can join your team. That kind of connection between people is such an important element of true kind of startup ecosystem support. And that's something we focus really hard on in what we do. We have 200 desks of collaboration space that is obviously closed at the moment, but is going to reopen in a couple of months. And that is focused on this, making sure everyone is working closely together. We're running things in there every day that are designed to bring different groups of people together. We're doing ad hoc introductions between people that we support. We are rearranging the seating plan for everyone that we support as well, so that we locate different people together that we think are going to work well together. I think it's particularly relevant to an international audience because there's something really nice about having a peer group. If you don't know anyone in town, or even for people in Sydney, if you're just going to a university for the first time, to be able to walk in and be surrounded by people you know are like you, that are all trying to figure out what they're doing as entrepreneurs, and are all really, really supportive of each other, no matter who each other are. I think that's just quite a nice environment to operate in as well. The second, and also I'll get back to that. The second area that we focus on strongly, so the first area is connecting people strongly to all the other entrepreneurs around UTS. The second area that we really invest in is connecting people to what they need. So that sounds really simple, but okay, you have a community of 360 startups that you're supporting. This go and find what they need and connect them to it. It's obviously a lot harder than it sounds, because every company is different. If someone's coming in with a clothing company or with a algae tech company or accounting software company or whatever else, the pathways they're going to take are going to be different. The expertise they need is going to be different. I like that we don't try to say, here's what everyone needs to do with their company, because it lets us support a real diversity of companies. If you're doing a clothing focused startup, we'll do everything we can to make sure you're connected to people that are already working in that industry, people that are manufacturing different things, people that have knowledge in supply chains, relevant customers that you might be able to bounce ideas off, or you might be able to actually start selling to, or investors that operate in this area, or industry bodies that work in this area, researchers. There's so many researchers and lecturers and other people at UTS with different expertise, and we work to connect people with them as well. Facilities across UTS, so everyone in UTS Startups gets free access to Protospace, the rapid prototyping facility. That's like a $40 million facility that UTS has, plus a whole bunch of other things that we work to connect people to. And it's kind of, I know you're probably sitting there going, okay, I get connected to what I need. What more do you need? Do you need someone standing here pretending they know what you need for your business? I can tell you exactly how to run the company I ran 25 years ago. If you want to do that, and if you want to do it 25 years ago. I think the transferability of people's experience as entrepreneurs is really overrated. I think it's really good to learn from entrepreneurs that are very similar to yourself and are doing something that you want to do very close to the time that you want to do it. That kind of fast following of people that you find interesting is, I think, a much better way to learn than sitting down with a book and going through something that was written 30 years ago, or going through someone's autobiography that they, again, wrote about something they did 30 years ago, and they do an idealized version rather than the truth about what actually enabled them, what they actually did, and what they actually got. So sorry, I'll stop myself ranting a little bit. We do run a lot of kind of mentoring sessions where the goal is to connect you to things. So we bring in, we've got a roster of 25 mentors that are all chosen based on their professional networks. So if someone has a really strong research network, or a really strong network in a particular industry, or a really strong network in VC, we're pulling those people in, sitting them down with you and saying, what do you need? And then providing introductions for those things that you need. In all of our check-ins, we have one of our staff members as well. And the goal there is to make sure you're also connected to all the people in the community that might be interesting. So if you're looking for particular skills or people running particular companies, those kind of connections we're quite good at as well. It's basically you could think of it as a kind of sticky, lucky environment to be an entrepreneur. It's sticky because you'll fall into this kind of sea of wonderful, highly motivated, interesting entrepreneurs. And that's a hard thing to leave, I think. And I find once people join, they don't tend to leave. They continue working on different things. So that as a commitment device, if you're not quite sure, or if you just want to not be doing things on your own, I think gives you more chance of pursuing and persisting in doing something. And that kind of lucky side of it is just making sure your surface area for good things to happen is as large as possible as well. So I think we do that particularly well. For example, 24 of our startups have been accepted into leading accelerator programs across Sydney in the last year, which during a lockdown, the first set of lockdowns in Sydney, I think is ridiculously good. It's definitely better than I've seen any other university do. Again, you see a lot of universities with their own accelerator programs internally, and they keep people in those programs. Some of those programs are quite good, but I'd accuse some of maybe being a bit of a bubble that can keep people out of leading programs. We had 3 of our startups accepted into StartMate, which is the most competitive accelerator program in Australia. And I'd argue that getting people into those kind of programs and showing that these are the best of the best startups that are out there is much better than putting them through a program here, which might provide some support, but won't provide the external validation and external connections that our kind of approach can provide. I'll pause for a second, and I'll circle back to some of my notes in a sec. Ishika, thank you for being patient. What are your views about starting a clothing brand in Sydney? We have a really vibrant fashion tech ecosystem in Sydney. In terms of fashion design, I see a lot going on around the place. In terms of brand building, I see a lot going on. I know there's a fashion tech hub coming soon. I'd expect that over the next couple of years. I'm not quite sure when, but that's a collaboration between UTS, TAFE, and someone else, that is going to be located right next to UTS as well. I think it's really underrated as a kind of business. I love e-commerce. I love clothing brands, and this people building something again that is possible today. This building the audience, building an identity, sorting out the kind of supply of things in a way that you couldn't do before. I think it's a really interesting area to be working in. And if you're looking for experienced people that have worked in fashion tech or kind of brand building, clothing brand building in Sydney, I don't think you'll have a hard time finding them. I think it's good. I'm not sure it's the best in the world, but it's definitely competitive. Best advice for upcoming entrepreneurs. Uh, uh, nice, easy question. I think there's a different path that every entrepreneur ends up following. And there's a different set of skills that you're going to need for what you do compared to the person sitting next to you and what they do. And I think people get too worried about trying to learn everything they need to know before they're doing something. And in this world where there's so many different things you could be doing, I think the common skills to all of those things are kind of not as useful as you might think they are. I also think that learning about entrepreneurship sometimes can be less interesting, much less interesting than actually doing it and having a reason for learning. So my advice generally is like never risk anything you're not prepared to lose. So just be aware of what you're getting yourself into at all times. You don't have to put everything on hold and throw everything into a particular entrepreneurial pursuit. So take a measured step into it. But start trying something. If you have an idea, start to figure out, how can I do that particular thing? Start talking to people about what it is, getting their feedback. Start trying to find other examples of people that have done similar things and learn by what they've done. As soon as you have that idea that you're starting to figure out, you're learning about a whole bunch of things that you wouldn't otherwise learn about, and you'll have reasons to learn about them as well. I think the alternative that a lot of people do is this going, some people get a lot of books and then don't read them. Some people get a lot of books and then read them and then turn themselves off doing something. The people I see doing well are the people that just start doing something, start learning, maybe start doing something different once they figure out whether that was a good idea or not. But it sounds kind of silly, but really the best advice is just to start trying. I'll get to a couple of other points before I get to the next questions. I will say we do have things across UTS that I think are really good at supporting people while they're doing something entrepreneurial, like the Diploma in Innovation or the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship or the BCII. We've got Tech Accelerator, which is a kind of prototyping focused accelerator educational program. We did an audit a couple of years ago of all the subjects across UTS that are relevant to entrepreneurs. We found about 70. About 70. So there's so many kind of subjects that are relevant to people that are thinking about doing something entrepreneurial across UTS. I won't pick a favorite, but I will say there's a wealth of things you can choose from. I'll just throw this point in and then I'll focus on the Q&A. If you take nothing else away from this, take this, that UTS is different to other universities in how we support entrepreneurs. It's honestly, I've seen a lot of different universities and talked to them about the different programs. We are focused on this, helping people understand what they can do and encouraging them to start. We are focused on building that super supportive environment where you want to continue what you start, and you can find all these other interesting people to engage with and work with. We are focused on connecting you to everything you can find around Sydney, inside and outside the university, that's going to be helpful to your startup. And all the kind of educational things we do across UTS then come from the faculties. And they do that incredibly well in a way that makes sense for whatever you're studying. But UTS Startups itself is just creating this hotbed of startup activity. So if that's the kind of thing that sounds interesting, I think you'll like UTS. And I'll also say, people ask me sometimes, okay, how you've got 360 startups, you've seen 700 over the last 3 years from students. How are those startups going? A lot of them are making money, if you care about that. The kind of proof points of receiving investment and building companies are definitely there across the community. But I'd say that the outcomes of entrepreneurship are either you make money from doing, or you have impact in the world that you want to have. So solving a problem or this changing how something works. Or you as an entrepreneur learn things that you wouldn't otherwise learn. So even if it's just confidence or resilience or this design around something or how to lead people or all the kind of things you can think of that you'll get by trying to build something by yourself. I'd say 100% of the people we work with end up getting something positive out of their experience. But it's definitely different in terms of what they get. Okay. I hope this has been a slightly different presentation to what you've seen from other people. I'll dive into more questions. Victoria, oh, sorry. Oh, there's been quite a lot of questions. Sorry, bear with me. Kayla Lee, I've heard that the Australian government is looking at charging businesses to open online social media accounts. No, I haven't heard that. If please send me the link for that. I really don't think that's true. That might be a reference to a dispute between Google and Facebook and news organizations. So there was something 6 months ago around social media linking to large news agencies in Australia and needing to compensate for some of the links being provided. But that only applies if you're a large media company. It definitely doesn't apply to the kind of startups we're talking about. And it benefits those media companies instead. That may not be what you're talking about, but I think it might be. Do international students have opportunity to initiate startup in Sydney? What measures do you have in place to support engineering students for entrepreneurship initiatives? Maxwell, thank you for your question. International students, definitely. I'd say I don't encourage people to incorporate a company straight away and kind of do all the formalities of a company, because A, it's not fun, and B, it's premature. You can definitely, as a person working anywhere, start to work on a problem, start to figure out if there's customers for that problem or the solution that you come up with. And then once you get to a stage where it's worth figuring out, how do I do this in a more formal way, talking to accountants and other people about, is it best to incorporate in Australia? Is it best to incorporate somewhere else? I don't see any problems in doing that. In UTS Startups, we have about 15% of the people we're supporting are international students. So it's a bit lower than I would like it to be honest. I think the international students that we have bring such a wealth of kind of market knowledge and kind of perspectives on things. They definitely make particularly good entrepreneurs. I'd love to see more. Sonica, what are some of the influential startups that came out of UTS? Fantastic question. See, this is like picking a favorite child. I have two children, a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, Audrey and Ted, and they will never know which is my favorite. And I don't have a favorite. But others, for a bit of flavor, there's one called Espresso Displays. So it's the world's thinnest portable display. And this was kind of bizarre, because I hope they don't mind me talking about this. They were just sitting, so two engineering students were sitting, working together on a project, obviously a uni project, and sharing laptops and thinking, wouldn't it be great if we had an extra screen for this? And one of them liked kind of 3D printing and 3D prototyping. And he thought, oh, how about I just kind of make a few designs, print them out, and just play around with what kind of design might make sense for a kind of portable display. Then got into, okay, this kind of looks nice. How can we source different things and kind of bubble gum them together to make that into a display? And then went to China for a little while, spoke to a whole bunch of people in different manufacturing plants about different components they needed. Got something together, kind of working, shot a video, did a Kickstarter, and I think they're up to about 5,000 units that they've sold. And that's been around for about 2 years. It's bananas. It's the kind of thing you look at and think, okay, that I would expect to come from a much larger company. But it's just two people that say, I'm going to try to do this. And it's not unusual. The examples I see, and there's a lot more like that, where you look at it and think, this is a startup that can stand anywhere proudly. But if you go back through the history of how they got there, it's never a kind of grand vision from a mountaintop. It's just a bunch of random things that end up working their way towards something impressive, if they choose to. Okay. Lani, how many units are in the program? So we don't have units. Everything we do in UTS Startups is extracurricular. That's good because you can take things at your own pace. You can schedule things around what makes sense for you. For the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship and Diploma of Innovation, I think you'll have to check out the different things that are interesting to you. Again, there's a large number of them. Abdul, how does UTS help in making sure that alumni get results in their startup businesses? Again, that support continues. So as I mentioned earlier, the support that we give around this, bringing a kind of vibrant community of startups together and then connecting all of those startups out to things that are helpful, is the bulk of support that we give. And that doesn't sound like much, but when you do it really well across a really large number of companies, that becomes a valuable thing. I'd point to a lot of commercial incubator offerings that often cost quite a lot of money, maybe $800 a month or more, that provide exactly that without all the overlays that we provide on top for all the curricular support and other things that UTS does. And we do that without charging for it as well. This does not kind of add any expense to what you do. And as a alumni of UTS, again, we're not charging for it as well. We do ask that the people we support contribute a bit of time, a bit of effort to supporting all the startups around them. But that, I think, this comes naturally from a good, well-working community as well. Sorry, Kumar, I just saw your note about running out of time. I'll do one more question. Maybe two. Natapon, does UTS Startups still support students after graduation? As of a couple of weeks from now, we will. And Ishra, what are the available majors available for entrepreneurship? Okay, I might refer you back to the handbook because there's a large number of them and they differ based on faculty as well. It's sorry to not answer that well, but it's been so nice to have your attention here tonight. It's getting late. I need to put my kids to bed, but I hope you enjoyed a slightly different format for this. I will say, I'll just put this in the chat. 1 second. startups@uts.edu.au. That email address, startups@uts.edu.au. Send any questions you have to that address, anything at all. Don't be afraid of silly questions. Just send them over and we will address every single question as soon as we can. And if you are slightly entrepreneurial or you think you might want to be around kind of entrepreneurial people and maybe catch the bug, I look forward to seeing you at UTS soon. Thank you very much, everyone.